So you want to start the forward stroke by making sure your hands are in the right place in the paddle. Using the paddler's box to do that, should be about shoulder width apart. For the forward stroke, and many of our strokes for paddling, we're going to have straight arms and torso rotation. So straight arms forces your torso or your core to turn or rotate like I'm doing here. And as a result, you're going to get a lot more power for the least amount of effort. That's the goal here, is less is more. The four parts of the forward stroke are the catch, where the blade goes in the water right there, power phase to my feet, the exit, and then the recovery. Catch again, power phase, exit, and recovery includes a feather. In detail, I'm standing in the middle of the board, which is the most stable place to be and the fastest. My knees are slightly bent, my feet are shoulder width apart, my lower arm is straight, and that allows for the rotation of the torso, which I mentioned earlier. My hands are always loose, even in rough water, and I'm reaching at my waist, which is called hinging. I'm also looking where I'm going. If I'm looking left or right, I'm going to go in that direction. And the reaching out we're going to do for most of the forward stroke. If you stand straight, then you won't get much power out of it. But the stroke will start with a reach, and then we'll stand up, and then you reach and you stand up. Another angle here, I want to make sure my body is in line with the nose of the board, or rather my nose in line with the nose. If I'm leaning left or right, the board will go in that direction. My upper hand is over the water. That's going to allow me, this is at the catch, that will allow me to paddle straight. We'll talk about that more in a minute. My knees are slightly bent. My elbow is also at my eye level. And if my elbow is above my eye level, for that upper hand, I can actually injure my shoulder. Also, once again, I'm looking where I'm going. If I'm looking at my paddle, the board will actually go in that direction. Here's a forward stroke, a little slow down to kind of show you the details. Going into motion here. I'm at the exit, slicing that blade out on my side. It's like a pendulum. I'm going to rotate it into what's called a feather. The blade flat, that means the power face is up. I'm reaching forward up towards the catch, and at the last second I'm going to put that blade in the water. Power phase, rotating my torso, a lower straight arm allows that to happen. Exit, feather, and we feather to slice through any wind coming towards us, and it gives you a brace if you get tippy. Catch, rotating, my hands are loose, lower straight arm, and in this case I am looking where I'm going, which I shouldn't be doing. In that case, the board will actually go in the direction I'm going. Reaching forward again for that hinge, lower straight arm, power phase, and repeat. Here I'm showing you how to switch hands. After every few strokes, you're going to need to switch hands because the board will start to turn. So I'm going to bring the paddle in towards my exit there. I'm going to bring it into the exit there, pop it out. Lower arm lifts it up out of the water. I switch hands to the other side, raise the upper hand to the top, and put the blade back in the water. So this is something that gets a lot easier over time. We can do it quite quickly if you're in a rush with some practice. So I'm going to talk about how to paddle straight. There's a few factors involving that, and one is simply if you see that rope on the side of the board there, that's where the blade goes in the water. If you put the blade at the nose, it's going to curve around and actually turn the board. That's actually a sweet turn. So put it in up at the catch and imagine an imaginary line going straight in line with your rail to your feet, and we exit at our feet. And there's a few other tips we'll use it as well for paddling straight. Another thing for paddling straight is keeping a vertical shaft. So you can see my upper hand is over the water, and my shaft is vertical through the power phase of the stroke. So that in line with the red line in the bottom with the straight line parallel to the hull. I'm going to paddle more strokes on one side, and actually I paddle predominantly on my left side, and I can paddle a mile or so in normal conditions on that left side. Then that can also lead to some injury of doing too much at one side. But it is nice to be able to paddle and be in control in that way, rather than switching hands all the time. Here's a few more samples of that. Sizing up my hand on the paddle, arms rather. Vertical shaft, upper hand over the water. My body is over the middle of the board. Hopefully I'm looking where I'm going. A little bit of a turn there. Coming back in, upper hand over the water, I got that vertical shaft, and the blade is going parallel to the hull. Here's another version here, under speed, behind a boat, vertical shaft. I'm also using short strokes. If you notice I'm bringing my paddle to my feet. Longer strokes are not actually more fast. These are very common mistakes we see, people bending knees too much, and really long strokes. Watch that super long stroke this person's doing, or rather me. Longer strokes are not faster. They'll actually slow you down. The recovery to the front of the board is so slow, you actually will slow yourself down. And you don't need to pump your knees that much. Another very common thing we see is a feather that goes way up, or recovery that goes way up in the water, in the air like that. You're creating a wind drag, and you'll make yourself unstable. Instead, we'll use a low feather at the recovery there. The feather power face up. The blade will slide over the top of the surface. Another thing we see very common is people reaching forward and then halting before the blade goes in the water. So as soon as you reach forward, the blade goes in the water. So here we're going to put it all together here. At the catch, see my lower arm is very, very straight there. My hands are loose. Exit. I'm not going to feather here because often when I start with beginners, we don't begin with the feather. There's a lot of stuff to think about and put together. So a blade comes to my feet, exits out, lower straight arm, and as a result of the lower straight arm, my body has to rotate and then putting back at the catch. My blade is completely deep all the way down to the shaft. If you're splashing, you're not deep enough. That's something we see a lot of. Standing up, I'm reaching out towards that catch, lower straight arm, blade, immersing that blade to my feet, then reaching forward again. And this is just a repetitive movement. You can see how many strokes I'm getting on one side as well. That's something to count. And you might find you have a good side and a bad side. My left side is my good side, so I can paddle until the cows come home on my left side. But my right side, immediately, I can only do 10 strokes before the board turns. So reaching forward there, deep stroke, exiting. Now I'm adding a feather. Reaching forward in real time. The purpose of that feather is to slice through the wind with the board moving forward or any wind coming your way. And also if I get tippy, I can slap that blade down right on my side there. So reaching forward, and also I don't need to reach out super far. I'm only reaching as far as I normally would bend over. Racers might go further, but for normal paddling you don't need to. I got a pretty good little speed there, probably going about 3 knots. Hands are loose the whole time, little hand switch, bring my upper hand to the top. Reaching forward and standing up, and reaching forward and standing up. If you got to reach forward for your stroke. If you don't reach forward, you won't go anywhere, at least not very quickly. Nice little feather there, right over the top of the water. And if you are in a hurry or beginning of a race, want to catch a wave, etc., you want a faster stroke. That's called a high cadence. Everything remains the same except that my paddle stroke is shorter. I'm going to take the blade out of my feet instead of behind my feet, which I was doing before. Everything else is the same. My hands are loose, so I'm looking where I'm going. You can see I got some good speed going up there, approximately 4 to 5 knots at this point. I am actually staying back a little too far on the board, the nose, or there I just adjusted. I just moved forward. And you can do that in one of our modules where we talk about walking on the board, making sure the board's properly flat on the water for the most amount of speed. So one thing that's really good to practice is to paddle with the nose or the front of the boards out of the water like this. So I've stepped back. I'm in what's called a staggered stance, where my left foot is behind me, and that allows me, for me personally, a little more flexibility in my stroke. Some people might do a forward stance here where both feet are facing forward. But this is a really good practice. It's actually difficult to keep the board going straight. As you can see, I'm getting close to my boat there. But it's really good practice doing this. And once you stand back in normal position again, in the middle of the board, it will actually be easier to do the forward stroke. And you can practice this by moving further back on the board. And it's the same technique I talk about in another module about how to do the pivot turn or stepping back on the board. It will also give you more confidence to learn about how the trim of the board works. The trim is the front and back control of the board, whether you're stepping forward or stepping back. Here I'm jacking the nose up a little further, and at that point, because we're running out of water, I can actually turn that into a pivot turn, and 1 or 2 strokes turn that board and 180 in the other direction. This one here, I'm going to turn backwards on the board using a brace in the water there. I'm going to actually paddle backwards, so a forward stroke backwards. Everything here is the same. I have a vertical shaft. My paddle's going down parallel to the hull, but I'm looking where I'm going, so I not only don't hit something, but also by twisting and looking behind me, it's giving me torso rotation for more power. And I can also turn the blade the way it's supposed to be in the other direction for going backwards. You'll probably get a little bit more grab out of the water. But this is really good practice. I highly recommend it. And when you turn back around and paddle in the normal forward stroke, I can guarantee you your forward stroke will actually be more efficient and you actually have more confidence. So here we're going to put it all together and have some fun in some open water chasing my friend's boat. So I got the vertical shaft, I got a high speed stroke going there, a little of a straight arm, I'm reaching out, kind of hard to see from that angle. I have a little bit of a staggered stance. I like to have my left foot behind a little bit. It just kind of gives me a little more control of the board. Not everyone does it, it's a personal preference for me. Doing a little bit of a sweep stroke to move to my right there. But this is good practice. Get out in some slightly rough water like this and kind of get used to different types of wind and waves, which we'll talk about as well in other modules. You can see my forward stroke, lower arm is straight, upper arm is actually straighter than has shown before, so I get more torso rotation. Nice quick feather there. Moving right along.